Hi there, this is David and welcome to my latest top 10 list, the top 10 SNES RPGs that were not made by Square or Enix. There are many top 10 lists out there of best RPGs for the SNES, but they all include the same games and names: Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, Chrono Trigger, etc. So I wondered, what would a top 10 look like if I eliminated all Square and Enix games from the running? Well, I can't say the list isn't diverse, and I had to dip into some Japan-only translated games to fill it out, so without further ado, here goes! Number 10, Illusion of Gaia. At first glance you might think this is a Zelda clone, but running around fighting enemies and bosses is where the similarities begin and end. Illusion of Gaia is its own beast and, much like the Guardian Legend, I'm shocked that there hasn't been a remake or at least a clone of it made by some other company. The game follows the adventures of Will as he goes around the world to some real and fantastical ruins such as Angkor Wat, the Great Wall of China, the Lost Continent of Mu, and even the Tower of Babel. Armed with only his trusty flute and the powers of telekinesis, Will is struggling to fight off the impending Doomsday Comet, which promises to destroy the Earth and alter evolution for all eternity. To aid him in his quest, Will gains the power to transform into much stronger Knight Freedan, and then, much later in the game, the awesome ninja Shadow, each with their own abilities. The game loosely forms a quadrilogy with Soul Blazer, Terranigma, and the criminally underrated Grand Stream Saga. Number 9, Eternal Felina. This is a pretty quirky title released only in Japan, but translated a few years back, it's mostly known for the supposed lesbianism that the two heroines engage in. And while there are some jokes and undertones referencing it, the real storyline is much more serious. Felina is a Clean, a discriminated race of people, and as such, she lives as a slave and is forced to fight in the arena, where she pretends to be a boy in order to survive. The story is very unique, and to cement the farce of being a boy, Felina marries Lila, who is in all intents and purposes her beard. But through the course of the game, Lila actually falls in love with her. Also, as Cleans, the party experiences outward racism by the NPCs and the antagonists alike. The battle system is active time, much like Final Fantasy IV, and your attacks are based upon which weapons you have equipped, similar to a Saga game. Different weapons bestow different spells, attacks, and ability upon your party members, and you can have up to 3 different weapons equipped at any one time. The game can be old school at times, and unfortunately the patch isn't 100% complete, but the segments that aren't translated are so minor that they're not in any way going to stop you from completing the game. Number 8, Ys 4, Mask of the Sun. Having only recently been translated into English, this is a definite hidden gem on the SNES, and while not as good as Ys 4 Dawn of Ys on the TurboGrafx-16, it still deserves a spot on the list. Mask of the Sun thankfully drops the gameplay changes of Ys 3, and opts for the more simplistic design of Ys 1 and 2, where you run into enemies like a battering ram and smash them into oblivion. The progression through the land of Celceta is nice, fast-paced, and the landscapes are varied. However, the game isn't perfect, mostly because it was rushed to the market in order to beat its TurboGrafx-16 doppelganger, but Mask of the Sun is still a very fun game. And honestly, that's what you play an Ys game for, to have a good time, enjoy a deep story, and steamroll enemies. Interestingly enough, of the 2 dueling Ys games, Valcom claimed that Mask of the Sun was the canonical title, that is, until they threw their own hat in the ring with Memories of Celceta on the PlayStation Vita. Number 7, The Magical Land of Woz. For those of you who've watched my channel for a while now, it should come as no surprise that I hold Woz in high esteem. The game is fun, inventive, and charming. The graphics are marvelous and the soundtrack is really just exquisite. The storyline is light-hearted and humorous, and to begin, you play as one of 3 different heroes who've been transported from the real world into the land of Woz, and you're tasked with saving their land from Balam with a little help from their own inhabitants. The world is expansive, full of unique lands and cultures, from zombies to fairies to flying fish. Throughout the course of the game, you also gain several modes of transportation beyond the usual airship and boat, such as tanks. If you've not heard of this game, I highly suggest looking into it, and if it strikes your fancy, downloading it. You will not regret it. Number 6, Terranigma. Much like Illusion of Gaia, Terranigma takes place in the real world, but this time you actually get to traverse all across the map to find new and hidden areas. Also, similar to Soul Blazer, the concept of resurrecting people and places is back as well. Terranigma takes the best of both games and combines them into a timeless classic. The story follows Ark, a mischievous boy from the underworld who accidentally turned everybody in his village to stone, But in order to rescue them and to redeem himself, he then ventures forth to 4 towers in the underworld, and once conquering those towers, he's able to revive a portion of the townsfolk, as well as restoring the lost continents of the upper world, which he's then later able to explore. The gameplay this time is similar to Secret of Evermore, and Ark uses varying techniques to fight with his elemental spears to curb stomp baddies into the ground. However, where the story of Illusion of Gaia followed the same tight-knit group of people around the globe, Terranigma's is much more scenario-driven, and frequently, after you complete a scenario, you really never see the people or animals that you affected again. That's not to say the story is bad, there's just some missed potential there. Number 5. Star Ocean. Add this game to the long list of gems that didn't leave Japan, although I do distinctly remember reading about it in Nintendo Power, but it was all a tease. It was developed by dissatisfied members of the Tales of team, and the series takes a lot of inspiration from Tales, but it sets the story in a sci-fi universe. About 15 years after it was released, it was finally translated, and well worth the wait. The story is ambitious for its time, and it follows a group of friends on an underdeveloped planet who are under attack by a mysterious disease that turns people into stone, and the only way to cure them is to travel 300 years into the past with the help of futuristic Earthlings who can travel through time and space. Star Ocean employs the innovative private action system where you can learn more about your party members through little scenes and vignettes in towns across the globe. The battle system was revolutionary at the time, but upon reflection, it's now pretty primitive. Though I do believe the battle system is more balanced than Tales of Phantasia. And speaking of... Number 4. Tales of Phantasia. Tales of Phantasia is the game that started 2 franchises, both of which I love, and for that, I'll be forever grateful. It's hard not to compare Tales to Star Ocean because the 2 franchises are so similar in gameplay, but the story in Tales of Phantasia is a bit more fleshed out, the characters more lively, and the world more believable. Overall, though, as for where they fall on the list, this was the closest call that I had by far, and they're both great games. They're similar in quality, and it was tough. But in the end, I gave the edge to Phantasia. I believe the Tales series really needs no introduction. Everybody knows what to expect with a Tales game, and this is the one that started the craze. However, if you haven't yet played Tales of Phantasia, I implore you, don't play the SNES version or the Game Boy Advance version, as they're both pretty terrible in comparison to the fantastic remake released on the PlayStation 1 and translated a few years back. Number 3. Breath of Fire 2. As far as I'm concerned, this is the pinnacle of the Breath of Fire series. The graphics are bright and beautiful, the characters all have a distinct motivation for fighting, and the storyline is tight, edgy, and shocking for me because at the time that I first played it, I was 14 years old and I'd never really experienced the whole religion is bad storyline before. Thank God I was much older when I played Xenogears, or else I probably would have went into shock. The music is spectacular and all the characters have special abilities in and out of battle, which makes for complex and fun dungeons, and it forces the player to think because in order to get through many dungeons, you need specific characters rather than to always just using your favorites or your most powerful party members. Also, the abilities smartly serve as a form of world and plot progression. For example, Jean can transform into a giant frog, which allows you to pass through lakes, and Spar has the ability to walk through forests to reach new areas as well. Number 2. Earthbound. What can I say about Earthbound that hasn't already been said? Not much, really, so I'll just tell my own story about the game. When I got it for Christmas in 1995, I was about 13 years old, and I'd loved RPGs ever since I first played Dragon Warrior on the NES. I played that game with help from my older brother because I really could barely read whenever we got it, I was so young. Anyway, none of my friends played the same games that I did, and I always felt like a loner when they were talking about the latest sports games or Mario. I wanted to talk about Cecil, Terra, and Chrono. However, Earthbound changed that for me. Not because my friends actually played it, but because it brought the RPG into the everyday modern age for me. I'd never seen an RPG take place in America or Eagle Land and use everyday people as their protagonists. For me, it elevated the RPG from something of a dorky, nerdy niche to something that everybody can enjoy and everyone can relate to. All the pop culture references are just icing on this extraordinary cake. And the number 1 spot of the best non-Square Enix RPG on the SNES goes to Lufia 2. On the surface, this looks like just another cookie-cutter RPG with turn-based battles on a town-dungeon progression, and while that's true, there's so much more beneath the surface. Puzzles, for one thing. In some of the dungeons, they're quite devious, but most of them are intuitive, and the game gives you clues on how to solve them. The The characters are very well done as well. They all grow and change as the plot advances, even the villains and the minor NPCs. The music's haunting and whimsical, and the graphics are top-notch, fluid, and vivacious. Lots of love and care went into this gem, and you can easily find yourself lost on a 100-hour quest as you delve into the ancient cave to divert yourself from the main task or to tackle the world's most difficult trick. The game is a classic and has stood the test of time. It's been over 20 years since it first came out, and that's why it remains my #1 non-Square Enix SNES RPG. This has been David with the top 10 best non-Square Enix RPGs on the SNES. If you like this, please like, comment, and subscribe, and have a good day.